seeing here is the new, or rather, the 5-year-old Mazda 3. And so, as a reminder, this car actually first came out back in 2019 and was basically the flag bearer of Mazda's premium aspirations. So, 5 years has passed, and sa totoo lang, in terms of the way the car looks, hindi siya nagbago at all, but that's not exactly a bad thing. So the Mazda 3 is basically a solid proof of what a well-designed car should be because, I mean, just look at it. Even after 5 years, ang sobrang ganda pa rin niya, very elegant, very timeless, and in the case of this Sportback, also very striking as well. So simulan natin yung kanyang front end because here in the new, or rather, the Mazda 3, you're gonna see here the familiar evolved Kodo design grille, which, as you're gonna see here, is flanked by slim LED headlights. And though hindi nagbago yung itsura ng kanyang headlights, it did inherit finally the new pulsating effect sa kanyang LED turn signals, just like in the Mazda CX-30, the CX-60, and the CX-90. So as standard na rin on all variants in this model year, meron ka ng 18-inch wheels, which in the case of the hatchback, or the Sportback rather, is finished in a graphite gray metallic paint. Then, moving towards the side, yun nga, this car is the flag bearer kasi of Mazda's evolved Kodo design language. Kaya you're gonna see here a lack of character lines, which again nga, in 2024, in my opinion, it still looks very good and indeed very timeless. Now, as you're gonna move towards the rear even further, you're gonna see a nice set of LED taillights which have a circular pattern, again now containing the pulsating LED turn signals that you would find in the CX-30, CX-60, and the CX-90. So yeah, basically this is a very clean design, very elegant, minimalist look. So that's basically testament to Mazda's excellence in designing a car that looks timeless, especially with their evolved Kodo design language. So yeah, I think that's a good time again for us to finally hop inside this Mazda 3 and see what's new after the past 5 years since this car was first released. So 5 years has indeed been kind to the Mazda 3 from the outside. How about na ngayon from the inside? Well, as you're gonna see here in the Mazda 3, here in 2024, there isn't really a lot of changes. So the fundamental looks are still pretty much the same. But again, that's no bad thing because even compared to newer competition like the Honda Civic, this is still a very premium interior and no other car sa totoo lang in this segment has been able to match the Mazda 3's premium feel. So you've got a generous amount of soft touch materials and even leathered surfaces here sa kanyang interior, here sa kanyang dash, sa kanyang doors, sa center console. It's only when you go to the lower parts of the car when you start to feel those hard scratchy plastics, but even then they're so far down the bottom of the interior that you won't even mind or even touch those parts anyway. Yun nga lang, while the interior is still the benchmark in terms of premium feel, I am not a fan of Mazda using gloss black plastic sa kanyang mga high touch points. And as you're gonna see here in this press car with around 1,500 kilometers in the odometer, there's already a lot of scratches, a lot of fingerprints. So if you're gonna be owning this car for the long term, you better add a protection film for those gloss black surfaces. So apart from the gloss black stuff na ngayon, let's move on to the switches and the practicality aspect of the car. Mazda's placed a lot of effort with the switches, the human-machine interface of this car, and therefore you have physical controls which feel very tactile, by the way, with a very satisfying click. And then one thing to note, by the way, for the 2024 model year is that wala ka ng cover sa kanyang cup holders, which has been a staple before sa pre-facelift model. And the reason for that is there's now a wireless charging pad which basically eliminates the mechanism for that cup holder cover. So yun nga, there's a wireless charging pad that's now available across all variants, along with a new 10.25-inch screen sa kanyang Mazda Connect infotainment system. So in terms of the interface, it's still pretty much the same pa rin from the previous Mazda 3, or rather the 2019 Mazda 3. That's again not a bad thing because itong infotainment system na to is a very good infotainment system. Also complementing the infotainment system is yung kanyang nice sounding Bose sound system, which if you're gonna remember in 2019 when I reviewed this car first, ang sobrang ganda nung comment ko sa kanyang Bose sound system because Mazda has really done a lot of effort in tuning the sound system to match the car's acoustics, sa kanyang roof, yung kanyang mga roof lining, yung pillars for example. They're all taken into account dito sa Mazda 3 to deliver a truly surround sound experience sa kanyang Bose sound system. So even in 2024, by the way, again, no other car at its price point matches the Mazda 3 in terms of the sound quality, yun nga, the interior feel, So this is pretty much a near luxury car experience sa totoo lang in 2024. So other features worth noting, by the way, is of course you have power adjustable front seats, or rather just the driver's seat, along with the 7-inch partly digital gauge cluster and a 360-degree camera system, which is nga lang standard only here in the range-topping mild hybrid version. So as you're gonna see here in the back of the Mazda 3 hatchback, or in their marketing terms, a sportback, well, that sportback roofline has sort of really eat into the headspace. Though if I were being honest, I'm actually able to fit myself pa rin. So in terms of headroom, kasi if you're gonna be here, the roofline is scalloped somewhat, so there's headroom pa rin for my 5'11" height. Then in terms of legroom, this seat, by the way, is in my driving position. So 5'11" driver, 5'11" rear passenger. Yeah, this is my legroom sa totoo lang. It's not that big. I do fit, yun yung importanteng part, but it's not spacious. As for the amenities, what you have here, by the way, is you have a center armrest with a cup holder along with your own aircon vents. Now I'm gonna try to sit sa middle seat, and I think this is not gonna be good news for me. Yeah. I practically wedged sa likod nung Mazda 3 when I'm seated here sa middle seat. And because of that center tunnel, I'm actually fighting na rin for footroom with the outer passengers. So not exactly the best place for adults here in the back of the Mazda 3 Sportback. If you're gonna watch my review from 2019 of the sedan version, by the way, of the Mazda 3, you're gonna see that car has much more space. Though, if you're looking for the best-in-class space here in the segment, it's gonna be the Honda Civic that will satisfy your needs. With that said, let's talk about the trunk space, which again is not the best in class, and is in fact pa nga one of the worst in the segment. So as a reflection of putting style ahead of practicality, the Mazda 3 isn't exactly the most practical car in its segment. So with the practicality aspect dealt with here in the Mazda 3, let's now talk about the drivetrain as well as the driving experience.
So you have two engine choices for the Mazda 3, both of which are 2-liter 4-cylinders and both have a 6-speed automatic. What we're driving today is a 24-volt mild hybrid version. And so what does an electrified Mazda 3 feel like on the open road?
So now that we've hit the road with the Mazda 3, how does this car feel like even after 5 years since hitting the market? So with this engine, itong kanyang mild hybrid drivetrain, this is actually a 24-volt mild hybrid system, and yung kanyang electric motors aid somewhat with the gas engine to give it additional power, whilst also reducing the load in terms of the car's electronics, yung kanyang pag-power ng kotse mismo, and so therefore improve din yung kanyang fuel economy, which we're gonna be getting to a bit later. But as for the drivetrain itself and how it performs, so in terms of the outright numbers, itong kanyang mild hybrid system isn't actually that more powerful compared to the previous or the non-mild hybrid version of this same engine, but it does add a bit more response to the way the engine performs whenever you overtake and whenever you mash the throttle, because basically the mild hybrid system sort of fills in the gaps. So for example, when the transmission will still downshift, and therefore mas responsive yung powertrain. And ito, uphill to na drive, medyo uphill ito, and the car's engine is doing so well in hustling this car. And so one aspect worth mentioning na rin is that you have to remember that with the mild hybrid system, you sort of expect the car's engine start-stop system to be smooth at that point. And so actually here in the Mazda 3 mild hybrid, that is actually indeed the case, because I have never turned off the system, yung kanyang engine start-stop, because it's smooth whenever it starts up yung kanyang engine and whenever it shuts off as well. So that's always a good thing with the mild hybrid. And of course, being a Mazda, this car is very sporty and fun to drive. In fact, I do think that the steering ngayon, because dati nga as mentioned, with Mazda going to this premium direction, medyo na wala ng onti or nabawasan ng onti yung kanyang sporty feel. So basically, if you're gonna listen to my review of the Mazda 3 back in 2019, ang nangyari sa kanya is yung kanyang on-center feel or on-center response has been dulled somewhat, in a sense na you don't need to do a lot of steering corrections whenever going through corners. Ngayon though, I do think that the front end and the steering is more eager to turn, more bitey yung harap niya. The steering also, by the way, has plenty of feedback actually. There's actually road feel entering to the steering wheel. I like the fact na talagang ramdam mo what's happening to the front wheels because that's always important whenever going through corners. And actually, mas responsive pa nga ngayon, I think, yung harap niya compared to before. So, within that 5-year time frame, actually, Mazda's been tweaking the car in terms of the ride quality, the refinement in power delivery ng engines, whether getting this mild hybrid or the non-mild hybrid version, both of which are 2-liter gas engines, mind you. The suspension's doing a really good job, actually, of keeping the car flat to the corners. You have to remember that this generation also ditched the multi-link rear suspension in favor of a torsion beam rear suspension, and though in terms of outright grip, mas mataas yung grip limit ng Honda Civic compared to the Mazda 3 as a result of that, pero this car is still pretty grippy pagdating sa corners. It's really doing a good job ngayon sa corners. The chassis tuning is well judged with the Mazda 3. So, in fairness to Mazda, they've really done a good job with the torsion beam rear suspension of this car in terms of the handling aspect and also in terms of the ride quality aspect. Let's talk about the ride quality because even the suspension has been tweaked by Mazda somewhat to be much more balanced na ngayon compared to when it first came out back in 2019. And so whenever you go through these bumps, there's better absorption na ngayon with the suspension itong Mazda 3. It is still firm though. Firm pa rin yung ride niya. Hindi matagtag but firm, but it's well judged. This is talagang one of those better riding Mazdas na ngayon, itong Mazda 3 alongside the CX-5, the CX-9, CX-8, the Mazda 6, and all of those current generation front-wheel drive Mazdas and the CX-13 na rin. Let's mention that car as well. Then, let's talk about the car's refinement. So, even the refinement aspect, Mazda has actually improved upon that quality of the Mazda 3. And so, therefore, there's even less road noise na ngayon compared to the car when it first came out in 2019. So that's complementing the improved suspension. So even though the car doesn't look that different when it first came out back in 2019, alam mong Mazda's been doing some tweaks underneath the car sa kanyang chassis, sa refinement niya, to continually improve the car and still make this car feel very relevant and very sporty, very evocative, yet very refined and comfortable. On a ride quality spectrum, I do still prefer the Honda Civic for having a better balance between comfort and sport, but the Mazda 3 isn't too far off actually. It's still a pretty good car sa totoo lang. So as for the highway driving part of the Mazda 3, so you have to remember that the Mazda 3 kasi is the flag bearer of Mazda's premium aspirations when this car first came out. And so with that said, even in 2024, itong Mazda 3 na to is still very refined. It's very quiet, very stable, and very rock solid pa rin yung kanyang chassis. And even if you drive this car past 100, na sobrang quiet pa rin niya, it's the absolute quietest actually in the segment, itong Mazda 3 na to. So, yun nga, 5 years down the line, it's still one of the best cars in terms of high-speed refinement, and therefore, this is gonna be a very relaxing car to drive, and especially for eating up all of those highway miles. So, refinement, stability, they're all pretty good, but what about ride quality? So, kanina nga, as mentioned, the Mazda 3 has a somewhat firm ride, and that's always been the character talaga. Here on the highway naman, because of that firmer suspension tuning, compared to, let's say, sa mga Honda Civic, mga Corolla Altis, this car does a good job actually of dealing with those wavy undulations. Sa NLEX, for example, lalo na yun dun sa may swampy area dun sa after ng Candaba Viaduct. So, there's no vertical rocking motions as a result. So, if you go over those undulations, ang result niya is the ride is settled, wala siyang extra movement space sa katawan ng kotseng ito. Yun nga lang, my observation with this car is in terms of the smaller bumps, like yung mga expansion joints sa highways or yung mga road cracks, like for example yun, expansion joints sa highway ngayon, they can somewhat upset the car a bit, but outside those small, yung mga ganong cracks sa road, the Mazda 3 does a good job naman in filtering other types of road imperfections, like itong mga malaking mga wavy na lubak. So, being the range-topping version, this e-Skyactiv-G mild hybrid model, you get the full suite of advanced driver assistance tech. So, this has automatic emergency braking, lane departure warning, lane keeping assist, even lane centering, along with blind spot warning, rear cross traffic alert, and automatic high beams, along with, of course, adaptive cruise control. Though, it must be noted however that blind spot warning and rear cross traffic alert is standard even on the 2-liter Sport. And then finally, let's talk about the car's fuel economy. We're currently doing 13.5 kilometers per liter, so that's really good actually. That's really good for this mild hybrid Mazda 3. And because of that mild hybrid part nga, this I think ngayon compared to the Honda Civic, the Corolla Altis, though not the Corolla Altis hybrid of course, this Mazda has the best-in-class fuel economy as a result of this 48-volt or rather pala, this 28-volt mild hybrid system that Mazda has developed for the Mazda 3. The Mazda 3 remains to be a very emotional choice in the compact passenger car segment. It's a car that prioritizes style, it's a car that puts driving pleasure at the forefront, it's a car that puts a premium interior quality and a very stylish exterior design at the forefront of the ownership experience with the Mazda 3.
So the Mazda 3 never officially got a mid-cycle facelift, but that might also have been the case since the Mazda 3 got annual updates anyway. These updates are enough to keep the Mazda 3 competitive even in 2024. And so while it may not be the most practical in its segment, there's no denying that the Mazda 3 is the most evocative and the most fun to drive as well. The Mazda 3 therefore is an emotional rather than a pragmatic choice.